said something was on the 22nd?
Well, originally it got programmed into the 22nd because we thought this class went longer. But then I think when we talked it over last time, there were several people who wouldn't be here on the 22nd because it was too close to Christmas. And people would rather get it over next week. Is that still the case? Mm-hmm. And again, it's an open book exam, and or computerized, and or whatever. You can't have, again, Jean Ann will be sitting in here and she's computer savvy, so she's going to make sure that anyone brings a computer does not have internet on. So you can't go out to Wikipedia and ask a question. You can only ask questions that's already on your computer. But on that note, is there any questions?
I have one. About because in Malaysia I eat a lot of fruits. Now,
sorry, I didn't understand that word.
In Malaysia, I eat a lot of fruits.
Okay, yeah.
So now that I'm here and it's winter, I don't really like to eat fruits anymore because I feel it's cold. But I've been getting cravings for like cooked fruits, like baked fruits, like apple pie and those kind of stuff. I don't know. I mean, do you think that it's better that way? So
what the first thing I want to do is commend you on your intuition, because it's exactly what you should be doing. Okay. So there's not to say you shouldn't eat fruit in the winter, but you're quite right. Fruit is cooling in nature by necessity. Obviously, different fruits are different ways. There's two ways to make sure the fruit's not cooling. And one is put spices with it. So this might sound really strange, but you can buy melons or papaya and stuff like that in Mexico, and they'll coat it in cayenne pepper. And so you're eating it very spicy. That's one way to heat it up, or the other way is to heat it. There's another phenomena for that, is perception of sweet is up to 5 times stronger if the fruit is heated. For example, if you have an apple, which you're allowed on the Candida diet, and you're really craving it to be sweet, if you have a baked apple, maybe a little bit of cinnamon on it or whatever, it's perceived as 5 times sweeter, but it's still safe in the Candida program. So an awful lot of people will, especially something like one of my favorite things when I'm really craving a dessert and I'm on a specialized diet like that, I'll get an apple pear. And a baked apple pear just absolutely tastes outrageous.
But, sorry, what about the nutritional value?
The nutritional value is almost the same. Of course, there are certain vitamins, especially vitamin C, that are affected by heat. So if they're cooked completely, it's not as great. But it's not like what we'd call problematic. So I wouldn't worry about it. So you still get some nutritional value out of it. Now, again, I would agree you get more nutritional value out of it when it's raw, but you would tend to be able to eat more when it's cooked, if there's no restriction on your amount of fruit. So for example, how many apples does it take to make an apple pie? 10 or so. And it's pretty hard to sit down and eat 10 apples. But I do know for a fact it's possible to sit down and eat an apple pie. I've heard. I've been told. Besides, it's the American way. Oh, we're Canada, aren't we? But you got the general idea. Yes, you had a question, comment?
Yeah, so it's a question pertaining to vitamin C and heat. So rose hips are a really good source of vitamin C. But what about if you make a rose hip tea? Does that kind of defeat the purpose?
Good question, and this one is actually being analyzed. And I actually can't remember the exact statistics, but the rose hip tea, so vitamin C is degraded by both heat and water.
Oh.
Okay, but not as much water if you're drinking the whole tea. And it really comes down to how much of the vitamin C you're getting out of it, because are you chewing the rose hip after? too. So all of that, because some of it's still going to be retained in the flesh. So, but I think it was something like 75% as strong of vitamin C. Now don't quote me on that exact number, but it did go down, but not enough to have it significant.
And is that with a really hot tea, or that's more like a...
It was like an infusion, I think, and I didn't do this study myself. I think, if memory corrects me, and this is like 20 or 30-year-old information that I'm telling you right now, I think it was Bradford Anger did that. He did it on several plants, rose hips, and the one that was the most astounding actually was strawberry leaves. He got a lab to analyze a whole bunch of things, including strawberry leaves, because he said it was high in vitamin C. And the lab went out and actually thought he had laced it with vitamin C because his vitamin C content was so darn high that they went out and picked their own strawberry leaves and analyzed it. And it was actually way higher than he did, because his actually literally sat in the pack for a little while before it got to the lab, etc. And it had degraded with time. But let's also put that in perspective. Any kind of fruit that has vitamin C and degrades in time anyway. So the later you go into the winter, so if you're going to get vitamin C, let's say out of an apple, not there's a lot, but there is some, okay, you're going to have less in June than you would in August or September. So coming back to your rose hip idea, probably one of the biggest things is rose hip jelly, because now you're actually eating the pulp and everything like that, but the heats are much higher. You're actually boiling the rose hips, and it did degrade, but it didn't degrade enough to make it not worthwhile. And again, the phenomena is almost exactly the same as we just said a few seconds ago, in the sense that a person would tend to be able to consume more hips easier in a tea or in a jelly than you would have just eaten a rose hip or two.
And how about...
So it comes down to, actually you end up getting usually more vitamin C because you would consume more. So even if it's degraded by 50% and you're eating 4 times as much, you're still getting twice as much vitamin C. And that's only one chemical. The minerals don't degrade anywhere near as much. So they're much more stable, and there's a whole bunch of things in between. So it's always been the big question, is raw better than cooked? And typically, yes, you got more nutrient value in a raw food than you do in a cooked food per gram, but typically a person would eat way more grams if it's cooked than if it's raw. Probably the classic example is cabbage. You're not going to eat that much cabbage when it's raw. You might have coleslaw or something like that, or a salad, but you could eat a whole big bunch of cabbage rolls or cook cabbage in a stew. You could eat a whole cabbage relatively when it's cooked, but you could only eat like a quarter of a cabbage raw type deal. So it comes down to quantity. You seem like you had another...
Yeah, so just again on the rose hips, what if they're dried and you're making a tea out of that? Like, does dried rose hip have like really...
Again, my data goes back so far that I'm a little hazy on remembering it, but I'm pretty darn sure this study was done on dried rose hips, comparing dried rose hips to dried rose hip tea and or dried rose hip preserve. I don't think they were working with fresh right off the bat in the rose hips scenario.